It's the last home game of the season, Villa fans. Don't worry, it'll be okay. They'll come back round again. We'll be at home come August. I'm sure we'll find things to do. Listen up, look out for details for the Talk of the Trinity support group. We'll help get you through the summer. Before then, this is Talk of the Trinity.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I am Baz Barrett and I am reunited with my co-host, Mr. Trinity himself, Will Forrest. You can tell he spent the week away decorating his spare room there. You know, we've all got to start somewhere. The Villa poster, pride of place. I mean, that's pretty much... If you're watching this on the YouTube, you will see what's happening. If you're listening to this, you'll have no idea. But you can see in terms of it is a shrine to Villa, many a poster up there. I mean, I'm not sure whether the instructions to paint the walls first have been fully adhered to. But, you know, the most important things are there for Villa. And speaking of the most important things, apart from this podcast episode you're going to be listening to right now, you can check us out on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. You can check out our previous episodes, either on our YouTube channel, Talk of the Trinity, or our audio providers, Apple, Spotify, Google, Geezer, Deezer, some other names we're now no longer allowed to say for legal reasons. And we're on the Fan Hub site, and probably by the time this episode goes out, we would have signed up for a couple more, just to spread the Villa word far and wide. And speaking of spreading the Villa word far and wide, we have had confirmation from the people who man our abacus to count our views that we have reached 2,000 downloads of our audio version of Talk of the Trinity podcast. So thank you to everybody who has listened to us over the course of the last season. Repeat listeners, first-time listeners, last time listeners, we appreciate you all. And, you know, in terms of on the Twitter page as well, appreciate the interactions we have with you and the likes, the subscribes, and all the other ways that you keep us going. And there's plenty more to keep us going after the season's over. You know, we'll be doing some end of season reviews. We'll be doing some Villa specials over the course of the summer. But before we get to those matters, you can check out some of the specials we've got up right now. We've got our team of the season, aged very well, I should say, by the time it went out as opposed to when we recorded it. But, you know, if you ever had that question on your mind of how many different positions can Sayo of Man City play, have a listen. The answer is probably more than you would expect. And also we have some other highs and lows in terms of the season in there as well. But speaking of highs and lows, brings us to probably a mellow middle in terms of events that happened at Villa Park on Sunday afternoon, just gone. 2:00, Villa won, Palace won. And it was a day for looking back as well as thinking about the future, because there was pre-game the display of the European Cup coming down over the Holt End and the flags, which I am reliably informed are now on eBay for a significant amount more than you paid to get a match ticket. I mean, I'm frantically scouring my credit card debts to see if there are any that I can pay off with the flag that I got at the game. And there was this former players and relations of the former players who were part of the 82 winning team before the game, given a guard of honor, and at halftime parading the European Cup and also the Football League trophy that was won the season before, which, you know, was the first time, I think, from my recollection, well, not my recollection because I wasn't there, but I think it'd been a very long time, shall we say, since we'd previously won the league before we did in 1981. So I saw beforehand that there was talk of the former players giving the current team a guard of honour onto the field, but then that idea was quickly jettisoned by Steven Gerrard, and the reverse happened. Common sense, Sam. I don't know, kind of, if I was Gordon, if I was Gordon Cowans or Peter Whiff, I'd be there. What am I giving these guys a guard of honour? I've won the European Cup and the league trophy, and these guys, might come 10th with a good win. So I think sense prevailed in terms of Steven Gerrard's tactical decision there ahead of the game. But moving on to the game itself, how did you feel in terms of Gerrard's tactical decisions in relation to the team and what happened during the game? What was your overview of the 90 minutes, Will?
Well, I think the best tactical decision is the one that you mentioned, to switch it up and give the class of 82 the guard of honour, which was a momentous occasion. It's very nice to see the club celebrating the past glories that we have achieved. Even though you and I wouldn't have been thought of then, at that point, a good few years before we were both born, despite our crow's feet eyes. But in regards to the team itself that you put out, I'm not too surprised with the lineup that he went with. The 4-3-1-2 again, especially as Palace seemed to try a different formation against us. I imagine Vieira was probably just thinking, do you know what, we might as well experiment. Whereas Gerrard wants to implement the style of play. And the biggest probably shock of it all was that Ramsey hadn't found his way back into the team in many senses, because he has been such a mainstay. He has started whenever he's been available. But Gerrard's obviously seen a lot from Douglas Luiz as a number 8, and rightly so, prior to Palace, where he's shown that he can do that role. John McGinn's got a new lease of life recently over the last few games. I'm sure that's something that you'll be happy with.
Always.
And those two players are very much suited by a marvellous Nakamba sitting and playing in that role. But we know, as with the Liverpool game, that Nakamba doesn't have it in him to get through 90 minutes at the moment. And I suppose one of the biggest things for Gerrard is, do you play Nakamba from the start and take him off after 60 or 70 minutes and hope that we're taking the lead? Or do you play him towards the end of matches and get minutes in his legs? Those ways, now we know we're not going to finish top half. I think the best we can finish is 11th, isn't it, after the Palace game? And you've sort of got to weigh up. Do you want to try and get 11th so that there is that stability again this season? Or do you want to try a few things out, maybe try a different formation, try a few of the youngsters? Yes, if we did that, it could impact the course of the Premier League season quite significantly with the two teams that we got to play. The other thing is we'd miss out on a lot of money if we finish 16th in the league. But no, I wasn't surprised. And, it seemed like we took the game to Palace in parts. Obviously, Danny Ings had the 2 chances to start the game, and you thought that he would have at least hit the target with both of them, especially after his recent run of form. Now, I've seen a few bits on Twitter saying that he needs to leave in the summer. I obviously don't think so. But I feel the same with Watkins as well. There's a lot of fans saying that Watkins should go. I don't think so either. I think they're starting to find their feet as a partnership, and you should continue with them unless you can bring somebody better in. Obviously, there's the rumours of Luis Suarez. Would he be better? He's a very, very good forward, and he'd obviously offer us something in some games, if not all of them. Jonathan David, absolutely rapid, doing well for Lille, 40-odd million. He, I imagine, will come in as a first choice. Though I also think that teams like Newcastle and those in those Europa League spaces at least will be sniffing around him as well. You never know, PSG with Mbappe seemingly on his way out. But we created chances. It was a shame that we let the goal in at the end. But it was nice that we didn't lose a game and we carried on our momentum of doing quite well recently. Even the Liverpool game, We only lost 2-1. We were unlucky against them. We created chances. We didn't sit back and try and counter-attack them. We took the game to them. We took the game to Palace as well. But to me, it seemed like Cash and Dean were that little bit deeper again, allowing McGinn and Louise to get further forward. And yet the first opportunity we really had with Dean to put a cross in ends up with Ollie Watkins scoring a bizarre goal through the legs of Gay, guided into that bottom corner.
Yeah, I mean, for a game that ended a draw, 1-1 on the paper, thinking two mid-table sides getting a draw, nothing really much to see here. I thought there was quite a lot to see in terms of, firstly, my views in terms of the tactical shape. I think we've talked in recent weeks about Ings and Watkins, get them playing up front together just to see if they can work as a partnership. And obviously against Burnley away, the previous game, very good performance, very good results. And well, the previous away game, I should say, obviously there was Liverpool in the middle. But I think it demonstrates in terms of, we've talked previously about Gerrard's preferred formation. What would he like to play kind of week in, week out if he had the opportunity? I think the performances and the team selections of the last 3 games we've had, Burnley, Liverpool and Palace, show at this stage, whether the solution is to go and buy players, whether we take what we got, I think we're not quite at that stage whereby we can play the same way every week, every game, and expect to get a result. Because in terms of, one of the things that kind of struck me watching it in terms of the Palace game, evidently 2 up front, it seems quite positive on the face of it, in terms of, you got 2 strikers, plenty of opportunity, but it puts a lot of emphasis on Coutinho to be the creative player. And I think especially in terms of, because it recently signed, everybody's really excited about that, a statement of intent, really hoping that he kind of takes Villa on to the next level. There is almost an element of that sometimes amongst the players in that type of formation, thinking just give the ball to Coutinho and he'll go past 6 people, do a gambol, and then, set up Ings or Watkins in the 6-yard box. But teams have wised up to that. And I think we touched upon it previously. They're fine giving Coutinho the ball kind of midway in our half or kind of on the halfway line. Teams are quite happy for that because they're doubling up and they're kind of crowding the space. And the crowds were calling for Buendia quite early on, especially in the second half. And he came on and obviously made an impact previously coming off the bench. And I think he did all right when he came on against Palace. I don't know whether there is a call. And again, we're near the end of the season, so the summer transfer business is going to have a lot of an impact on this. But if there was the same bunch of players at the start of next season, whether for games like this, whether we look to play Buendia and Coutinho together behind one up front, which on the face of it, you might think only one up front, that's negative, but getting 2 creative players in there, I think games against teams like Palace, I think that would help. And especially, I was looking in terms of, you mentioned Palace maybe playing a slightly different shape than perhaps they played previously in the season, but they got some good creative players, I thought. I mean, in terms of Conor Gallagher on loan at the moment, I mean, whether he'll stay, I suspect Chelsea will keep him simply because everybody else appears to be abandoning that particular ship. But then again, Chelsea may not exist if you believe kind of some of the rumours coming out in respect of the ongoing ownership situation at the moment. Eze, I thought he played really well. I mean, he's been injured for a lot of the season, but I think he's very direct player. And, not that he means anything at all, but I'd have him at the Villa. I think he's very good. Zaha, before he started getting a bit too wound up by John McGinn. I mean, in terms of Zaha is a very good player, but in terms of, there's always a fine line, I find, because Zaha was at the ref at every opportunity, especially in the second half, every time anybody looked at him. And I look back and think, was that like that with Grealish when he when he was at Villa, because obviously he got fouled a lot. And that was kind of my differentiation. Grealish got fouled a lot. Zaha he does get fouled. I mean, yeah, there was a few times we did leave one on him. I don't think there's any denying that. But I think in terms of the difference between a Grealish and a Zaha is that, yeah, Grealish will get kicks, say 8 times, and then the 9th time he'll get the ball, go, well, especially at Villa, will go past a few players, then create a chance. It doesn't seem to affect him as much as it does Zaha. Zaha, based on what I saw on Sunday, not that he suddenly played terrible, but he really did appear to affect him in terms of when McGinn was going at him. And in terms of that, I was sat in the upper hole, and so some of the fans around me it was a bit of a situation like I thought we'd lost based on some of the comments. But one of the comments I did hear that I did kind of agree with was in the fine linguistic tones you do hear on the Holt end, we do need more shit houses. And McGinn is the best one we got currently. So stick him on Zaha, which we did, wind him up and see what happens. And we did. But generally speaking, Palace are a good team, I thought, in terms of attacking wise, they look fairly good. Defensively, very compact in terms of good shape. I mean, a lot of draws this season. You can see why in terms of very solid the way they set up, but a good team. And you can play that game of, if you switch this result here to here, kind of, are you up or down on where you thought? Last minute Watkins should have scored. But I think if before Burnley you would have said a draw away at Burnley and a winner home to Palace, that's maybe what you would have expected. Perhaps 4 points out of those games. We got 4 points. It's all right, and that is where we are at the moment. I think we're all right. We're not brilliant. I mean, we're not coming into Europe because the league doesn't lie at this stage. We're not near the bottom. The league doesn't lie. I mean, some mathematical quirks, as you mentioned, may mean we come lower than we are at time of recording. But I think Gerrard summed it up kind of best in his post-match interview, where he said, we played all right. Played good in parts, didn't have that clinical finish. Summer's going to be important. Wants to bring some players in, get his ideas, and that's going to be it. But in terms of the last 2 games of the season, I would veer on the side of we should play what we think our best team is and try and come as high as we can. I mean, we should try and beat Burnley. Well, I say try and beat City tentatively. We should try and put a performance in at City. I mean, in terms of, obviously for Gerrard, depending on, we're recording this ahead of Liverpool Southampton on Tuesday night, but assuming Liverpool win at Southampton, the title's on the line last day. So there's Gerrard's team talk is going to be not go and win it for Liverpool, but he's not going to be playing the reserves, I don't think, if in any scenario. And players want to test themselves against the best, in terms of, even if there's nothing to play for Villa in terms of, up or down or Europe. You want to test yourself against Man City, best team in the league along with Liverpool. So you don't want to roll over, even if it does end up a scenario whereby you might end up shipping a few goals. But enough about Man City, because we will be doing a preview of Man City closer to the time after the Burnley game on Thursday night, which, almost as if I planned it, brings us on to the Burnley game on Thursday night at Villa Park. I mean, 8 o'clock in front of the Sky cameras. It's been picked. I think that was relatively late in the day that was going to be picked for broadcast on Sky. Obviously, Burnley having some issues, we say, at the bottom of the table, not helped by events at Turf Moor when we turned up and beat them. Contentious game against Spurs on Sunday, a penalty decision which was not particularly well received by the Burnley faithful, but they are in a battle down there. But before we delve into Burnley and delve into Villa, obviously the last home game of the season for Villa on Thursday, so you would expect, unless we get pelted 5-0 or something like that, there will be the traditional lap of appreciation or lap of deprecation or whatever it may be from the Villa players at full time. There will also be, as far as the scheduling is aware, at half time, there'll be the dedication to Villa fans who've sadly passed away. traditionally over the last 12 months, but I understand that because it hasn't happened for the last few years because of what we'll call medical concerns in the wider community, COVID, there's going to be a kind of a 3 years, I think. So they're going back from 2019, and also from players who have passed away during that time as well. There'll be a commemoration for them as well, presumably at half time. So I'll be there on Thursday in the Holt, and if you're there in the Holt as well at half time, if you can resist the urge to go and get yourself a pie and a pint. Obviously, Villa fans very appreciative and very respectful. You know, I think it'll take the full 15 minutes. I think in terms of that, but obviously that'll be we've had the Sunday game against Palace as the celebration of past achievements. There's also, without wishing to go too deep in life, you have the highs and the lows. So there'll be reflection of a different kind happening on Thursday, and then hopefully we will be looking forward to the future under Gerrard and the summer and beyond, and hopefully we will be in some parts trying to recreate former European glories in seasons to come. But back to the football. Thursday, we've mentioned formations, we've mentioned in terms of Villa having things to play for or not. We mentioned Burnley certainly having things to play for. What are your thoughts on Burnley, Will?
Well, I'll just quickly go back just to talk about what you mentioned about the celebration of life, really, of those hot ends in the sky. The last time that it actually happened, I was on the pitch. My granddad, as you know, used to work for the Villa, worked there for a long time, and let me tell you, it's one of the proudest things ever for me to associate with the Villa. Not only my granddad working for them, but the fact that they honoured him and they invited me and my family down to honour him as well. So it really meant a lot. All the fans taking the time to pay their appreciation, show their support, show their love for those who have lost villains over the years. So I would definitely encourage you to stay around and in the seated areas at that time, not go down to the concourse, or just to be respectful if you are going to, because it means a lot to those people whose loved ones are up on the screen. And that I certainly will be, and I'll be teaching my son all about that and the tradition that we have at the Villa. So hopefully you'll be joining ourselves in doing so. But to get back onto the matter at hand, and that being Burnley at home, well, I'm excited for it, and I think that the nice thing is that regardless, every game now we're excited about. And even though we feel that we may get spanked by City, spoiler alert for the next episode, we're still excited about that because we're excited about the end of the season. We're excited about Philip Coutinho signing and all of the players that he's going to attract, all the players that Gerrard's going to attract, the way in which we're moving positively up the league. I think we're even more excited about this summer than we were last summer, because last summer we had Grealish hanging over us.
Yep.
And we didn't really get excited until Bailey, Buendia and Ings all walked in through the door, So, yes, there's definite excitement for the end of the season, but very much so for this game. I'm expecting us to really put on a show. Last game of the season, I think Gerrard's going to say to the players, these fans have been here with you through thick and thin, regardless of performances against the likes of Tottenham, which wasn't the best, and the mundane performances that we've had on occasion as well at Villa Park. They've always been there for you. They're not turning against you. They realise this is a long-term project. And the Villa fans have been very patient with Gerrard, because I think they can see the signs that we could be a very good team under him. And for that reason, he's going to want the lads to put on a show on Thursday night, and I think they will deliver. Which formation they play to deliver that in, which players play to deliver that in, is anybody's guess. I'm sure we've got our own opinions on that, but one thing I can tell you is the opinion of our followers, or even Villa fans on Twitter, because it's not just our followers that have a go at our many polls that we put out there. So 4-3-1-2 is the formation of choice for the Villa followers. Unsurprisingly, Martinez in goal, Cash, Chambers, Mings and Dean in defence. And we took Conser out because we feel that there's going to potentially be some bad news about his injury. It didn't look like a very good one, and we hope and we wish him a speedy recovery.
Yeah, but it's always one of those, sometimes they're always worse because it looked fairly innocuous live. I mean, it didn't look like, kind of a crunching tackle or, kind of a terrible foul. So, yeah, they're usually the ones where it twings. But hopefully we are wrong and that he will be fit and firing soon.
It's the ones where they stay down when they don't normally that you start to worry, isn't it? But the fans also want to see Nakamba in that number 6 position. They're buoyed by the return to form of John McGinn, so he keeps his place. Now, I know that you're going, yes, under your table. Douglas Luiz.
He's playing anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Douglas Luiz drops out. Jacob Ramsey comes back in following his impact against Palace at the weekend after he came on, and also Luiz's not so great game, despite the 2 very good performances he had previously, just goes to show the competitive nature of the squad. Emi Buendia sees his name on the team sheet instead of Philip Coutinho. I don't know whether I'm surprised by that. I don't think I am, but I also am. And Watkins and Ings are the partnership of choice up front. If Steven Gerrard delivers that as the team going into the game against Burnley, are you going to be happy with that? Or are you going to be thinking, don't know, I'd have played, insert name here?
Well, I wouldn't be outraged in terms of that team. Because, I mean, in terms of, you take the back 5, that pretty much picks itself, especially if Konza is injured. So don't really need to worry too much about that at this stage. It really comes down to formation. And I think in terms of the 2 players, well, maybe 3 who you could say would be at risk if you change formation, Nakamba would be one. And then does Buendia play? And then depending what formation plays, do you play Ings and Watkins up front? In terms of Coutinho, there's excitement about him signing, obviously. I think we even got ourselves a bit of a cut price in terms of the transfer fee as opposed to what was previously being discussed. I mean, as I said, teams are sussed that we're going to try and get the ball to him, so they're going to double up on him. And so, if you're looking in terms of the numbers, in terms of goals and assists, it is down. I mean, that doesn't necessarily or very often tell the whole story because he still looks like our most creative player, even when he's surrounded. I mean, if it's a choice, if they're playing that formation, Buendia's been in form when he's come off the bench, so you can't really argue too much. I'd be, as I alluded to in the Palace review, I'd be tempted to play them both, Coutinho and Buendia, because I just think in terms of creativity, Burnley, we know how they're going to play in terms of they're going to line up 4-4-2, you'd expect. I mean, there's an argument that they're a little more creative under their new manager than they were under Sean Dyche. Yeah, but maybe. But, in terms of, I know they launched a bit of a tactical surprise against Spurs on Sunday, playing 5 at the back and played very well. Do I think that they'll play the same again at Villa? No, because I think they need to win. So I think they will be going for it 2 up front, 4-4-2. So that midfield area for me becomes even more critical in terms of literally you think we're going to outnumber them. But, in terms of you can negate numbers by good tactical discipline. So for me, the more creative players in there, the better. And so I'd be tempted to take Nakamba out for this one. Not because of necessarily him playing terribly, or being in terrible form. Games like Liverpool, where you need somebody to get in there, kind of break it up, get that defensive display. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, as we, touched upon in a previous podcast, we've got nobody else who can play the role as well as he can. I mean, you could say whether we could get anybody better. Yeah, we probably could. But the reality is we're not at that level. And so currently, the summer's going to be a big turning point, you would imagine, in terms of that defensive midfield position. You imagine we're going to get at least one in. But in terms of against Burnley, I'd go more attacking, in terms of McGinn play. I'd have Ramsey playing. And there is, in terms of, I know the debate is, should Louise play at 6? Maybe he's better at 8. Probably is better at 8. In terms of recent performances, would suggest that a little further forward suits him better. But against Burnley, I think in terms of having him at that 6 role, I don't think it is going to be a deep 6, if I can call it that. I think in terms of Burnley, they're going to be aggressive. They're going to, hold the line in terms of that. But, they're not playing 3 up front, and they're not going to go screwball scramble in the first 10 minutes. So I do think we're going to have the space and the opportunity, or we're going to need to create that space to cut through Burnley, because, in terms of sometimes against Palace, it was a little slow in terms of our play. It was, we weren't really looking particularly incisive. That's because Palace were very well, a combination of Palace are very well tactically drilled, as touched upon, but also just one more creative player in there, I think, will help. So I would, with respect to our followers and voters, I would switch formation for this game. And I especially with Man City coming up on Sunday, obviously we'll do the preview later in the week. I'd play Nakamba on Sunday. I think that's the type of game where you play Nakamba, not on Thursday, in my view. But in terms of the team that the fans have picked, if that was the team, I wouldn't be surprised, because in terms of the Ings-Watkins situation continues, in terms of both very good players on their day. Ings, you're trying to get into form, in terms of, there's always the feeling about Ings of, you get him chances, he will score. At the moment, it's not quite up to his usual ratio, but, in terms of, if you believe in him, you got to, there's no point dropping him, in terms of 2 games to go. But I say that, but in terms of which striker would I play up front instead of Ings or Watkins? I mean, in terms of, similarly mentioned in the Nakamba against Palace, in terms of maybe the role was slightly redundant. Watkins, especially get games like Liverpool, if you need somebody to hold up the ball, create time for maybe a more defensively minded setup to get up to the play, to keep the ball. Watkins is very good at that. If you're playing a team whereby you're not that far defensively back and you're looking to get on the front foot, then the need for a hold-up player, I mean, obviously you need to keep hold of the ball, in 101, but then it's not going to be as much route 1 you'd anticipate against the Burnley, or it shouldn't be, because we should be trying to outplay them. We got the creative skill, is my view. So in that hand, maybe Watkins' role isn't as important, or because he's the more willing runner, or the perception is the more willing runner, you play him perhaps instead of Ings. I would tentatively toss that one over to you if you can recover from those cruel words. I suppose, well, literally a 2-pronged attack I'm going to bring to you here. Firstly, do you agree with the fans in terms of playing the formation that they've suggested? And if not, and you play one up front, who would you play?
I can. He's got. Well, I'm lost for words, aren't I? I would play whatever formation Gerrard is planning to go with next season for this game, only for this game, to give them some confidence. And do I believe that will be the 4-3-1-2? Yeah. Do I also believe it'll be the 4-3-2-1? Yeah. I think he'll flip between the both. He said the other day, we're getting Coutinho in, there will be times he wants Coutinho and Buendia both on the pitch with one striker. And I'd be excited by that, especially against teams who are going to try and nullify our threat, the Palaces and those sort of mid-table teams. Maybe a Brentford you do it against. But I've also been a fan very recently of having 2 strikers in the team, because I think having 2 strikers in the team causes a lot more problems from a penalty area point of view. And when you see these stats nowadays of blah had this many touches in the penalty box and this team have had this many touches in the penalty box and whatnot, the more strikers you can get in, the more chance you're going to have touches, and they only need 1 or 2 in that box to bag a goal. If I was going to go with one up front, it's not going to be a surprise. I will go with Ings. And I think that's because as good as Watkins is faster over a long period. If you believe Danny Ings days, but he's faster there. He's got the height advantage. He's very good at getting behind teams and working the channels and cutting inside and getting his goals. I mean, his effort against Palace was a nice sort of predatory finish, if you like. He definitely was against Burnley with the header. We've seen him running onto through balls and putting them across keepers or inside near posts against Brighton this season, against Arsenal away last season as well. Whereas Danny Ings has also got that, you've got the luxury with him that he can score a variety of goals also. The one that was disallowed against Liverpool was a cracking finish. You even heard Jamie Carragher saying how good it was. But you have a look at that calmness of the one-on-one at Turf Moor. You see the close range first time sniper finish at home to Southampton as well. And the same with the instinctiveness to get back on side against Norwich. I would go with Ings for this one against Burnley because I still believe, and the wood is being touched, that if you have both of them in a one-on-one situation, he's the striker that you would want with the ball at his feet over Watkins at the moment, whereas Watkins works very, very hard for the team. They both do. They both work hard. But yeah, I'd go with the 4-3-2-1 so that we can get Buendia and Coutinho in. I think the thing is, Burnley then have got a lot of things to be mindful of. One, you've got Philip Coutinho, who is one of the best players in the Premier League on his day. He's the most naturally gifted player in our team. Yes, we've got him out of the bargain bucket, but you watch and see what he can do, and he could still be a world-class player who's playing for Brazil regularly now again. And then on the other hand, they've got Emi Buendia, who tore them a new one only a couple of weeks ago. And when you get him on the ball or you give him too much space, he causes problems. So their midfield is going to be occupied by them, as is their defence. And it will be a tactical masterclass in the fact that ball goes to Buendia, they're going to have to keep an eye on to see where Coutinho goes. They're going to have to keep an eye on Ings to see where his run is, or Watkins, whichever one plays up front. And vice versa, when that ball goes to Coutinho, it will allow them probably to have a little bit of pressure off them both in the fact that there's still somebody else on the pitch who can create. And then they can also incorporate the likes of McGinn, who's crossing over the last couple of games and whose creativity output has been the best it's been this season, probably. Same with Jacob Ramsey, if he's there and he wants to take the game to Burnley, and not to forget those flying fullbacks that we've got as well going forward. So I think the benefits of having two cams in this game outweighs the benefit of having two strikers. Whereas when you play Man City, I'd go with two up front, especially with the fact that they tend to invert their fullbacks, So are they going to be attacking as much down the wings, as through the centre? But going back onto this game, 4-3-2-1, I suppose the biggest question is, do you play any of the kids? And I appreciate that could just be a no, because I want to play my best team. But I think there's a few that are worth just mentioning as to who could get in. Josh Feeney and Lamar Bogard have both been training with the first team again. Could we see them come into centre-back alongside Mings and have Chambers in a holding midfield position? I wouldn't be surprised. Do we see Chambers at centre-back with Iroegbunam in the defensive midfield? I wouldn't be surprised with that either. And then, we're going to forget Ramsey. Ramsey's a first-team starter most weeks. He's up there. But could we see Carney Chukwuemeka get more game time? I said ahead of Palace, I'd have started him and Louise in the centre and midfield with Nakamba or Iroegbunam or Chambers as that holding player. I think we could see a tactical surprise with one of the youngsters playing. And if we were, I think the most likely one would be Iroegbunam playing in that holding midfield position with McGinn and JJ either side of him.
Yeah, but I don't think you can rule it out. I mean, in terms of obviously Tim played against Norwich, and it's a situation, as we mentioned, big game for Burnley. There's, if we played a team of kids, there would be accusations from the other teams in and around the bottom of crying foul and not respecting the integrity of the competition. I mean, I can deal with that argument, in my view, fairly quickly. I mean, in terms of, if you've got to 36 games of the season and you're safe, then I think you can do what you like. And then also in terms of, there's a squad. I mean, the Premier League has rules about squads, and in terms of, I think it's always difficult to say in advance always what team's going to be better, what's going to be terrible. I mean, I remember in terms of, they may have been the last team to get fined for this, or it was a situation whereby it brought the rule to attention for the first time, where we played Blackpool at home when they were in the Premier League on a Wednesday night. And it was before there was the 25-man team.
3-2.
It was 3-2, yeah. And Blackpool played the reserves because they had a home game on the Sunday against a relegation rival. We won 3-2 with a late winner. Blackpool were miles better than us, kind of that game, but what I can remember, their reserve team tore us the proverbial new one. And this was kind of back in the day where Villa, we weren't, we were all right, shall we say, in terms of our team. So you can never quite tell in advance. So I think in terms of, if we did play a team of kids, we've earned that right. I mean, in terms of, mid-table, could you say it's a particularly great achievement to feel you can do that? No, not really. I think that brings us on to a different question of, do we want to do that, in terms of, we touched upon before, maximising the opportunities to come as high up the table as possible. So yeah, in that sense, I don't think we should play too many kids, if any at all. I think we should play our best team. But in terms of having a youthful bench, 3 or 4, perhaps, with the opportunity to come on for 30 minutes in the second half, yeah, I mean, I think that's the type of situation whereby it's good to get young players on. And especially if it's, I mean, if we're winning 4-0 by then I suppose you could say no risk. If it's still 0-0 or 1-0 or tight, they're going to get a proper game for half an hour, because Burnley are going to be at it, if it's in a tight game. So they get experience that way. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, we've earned the right to do what we like. Do I think we should do what we like in terms of just playing kids? No. I think we should try and play a strong team, not for integrity reasons, but just because we, for our own reasons, need to get our business done to come as high up the table as we can. But regardless of the team we play, whether there's a few surprises in terms of the players or the formation, brings us to famous prediction time in terms of what we think the score is going to be. And game under the lights, it's always a different atmosphere for a night game under the lights. Does it make much difference to the players? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. But does it make any difference to your prediction? I mean, in terms of when we originally did this, the lost episode of when we previewed the Burnley home game, it was meant to be 3:00 on a Saturday in December, match abandoned due to COVID reasons. We both predicted a home win from recollection. Now those circumstances have changed later on in the season. Are you sticking with the home win?
Yeah, very simple. Yeah, I am. I think that we're going to see. I think we're going to see a big performance from the Villa. I do think that, as I say, Gerrard's going to tell them to go out there and do this for the fans, make life difficult for Burnley, make it go down to the last game for them, which it should do anyway, regardless of the result against us. I think we get a nice 4-1 win against Burnley on Thursday night. I know it won't be our biggest win of the season, but it would be nice to get 4 goals again, for only the second time this year. I think we see our strikers having a bit of a field day. We see Coutinho and Buendia lighting it up, or whichever one of them starts lighting it up. I also feel that we will see the introduction of a young Tommy O'Reilly towards the end of the game. He's been in and around the squad a lot this season. Gerrard's given chances to the kids when they've trained hard and trained well, and with him being around there so much, I think he'll get 5 or 10 minutes at the end. I'm I'm the same as you in regards to the kids. I think you want to play your best team. The only one that I would play at the moment, out of the ones I mentioned, is Irobenham, and I'd start him personally with JJ and McGinn, the back 4-5, as we said, and the same with Wendy, Coutinho, and Ings for me. Just give Watkins a bit of a rest ahead of Sunday. But yeah, nice big 4-1 victory. I could see it being more than that as well, if I'm being completely honest with you. But I think it'll get to the point where we start playing Olay football, and the fans will be very happy with that. I'm not sat in the Trinity, sacrilege, going into game at present. I'm currently sat in the Doug Ellis, right next to the Burnley fans. I'm really hoping we don't smash them too much, because my son has said that when we score, he's going to turn around to him and go, ah. And he said to me, what would happen? I told him they'd probably throw something at him or try and attack him. He said, well, you'd protect me, wouldn't you? I went, no, sounds like a bit of a you problem, not a me problem.
Funny enough, in that scenario, you probably want to smash them rather than, if it's 4-1, you kind of by the fourth goal, maybe a lot of the Burnley fans may have left kind of in a fit of rage. If it's 1-0 last minute, kind of, then you're giving it the big one. Then yeah, the reaction is probably going to be slightly different at that stage.
It will be when Jake is turning around going, in the last minute at them, going 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. He turns around and he goes, Will, nope. I'm down those stairs. Nope. I'm back towards the car park. I ain't sticking around with no Burnley folk who want to like bash my brains in. You know what I mean? But yeah, big 4-1 for me. What about, are you feeling optimistic still? Are you going for that positive win, or are you going to go with a positive draw? You know, that's about as positive as you are.
Positive draw. Well,
unless you've got COVID.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, it almost went perfectly to plan my Palace prediction, where I said 2-1 late winner. And when Watkins. Wally Watkins was through in the injury time, I was thinking, God, I'm a genius here. Then obviously missed, and I thought, well, I'm a planker. A planker, new words introduced to you by Talk of the Trinity podcast. In terms of this time around, I think I can't remember my precise prediction last time when we played them when we were meant to play them at home. It strikes me as a game I would have said 2-0, and I think it's going to be 2-0. Funnily enough, in terms of, it's going to be a tight game. Burnley are, as we mentioned, having their own reasons as to needing they need a result. Realistically, looking at the table, you think they are going to need to win to really give themselves a realistic hope of staying up. But no, a draw, leaves you needing other results on the last day from a Burnley perspective. So, and they played well against Spurs on Sunday, as you mentioned, so they're going to be no pushovers, and you know what you're getting in terms of a battling Burnley performance, regardless of who's in charge. But I do think that our quality is going to tell. I mean, it's going to be a different game than it was away at Turf Moor. Obviously, we were able to set up in a different manner and hit them more on the break. We're not going to, you would anticipate, not have that opportunity here, because Burnley are going to sit back and look for the opportunity to hit us on the break, which is why, we talked about the team, get a bit more creativity in there. But yeah, I do think we will break them down eventually. I mean, I can see a scenario whereby it's 0-0 at half time and we hit them with 2 goals in the second half. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be comfortable. So I'm not as positive as you in terms of thinking it's going to be raining goals. But in terms of, a couple of weeks ago, we sent Norwich down. We won't mathematically be able to send Burnley down on Thursday, but I do think the results will be the same and the outcome eventually will be the same in terms of 2-0 Villa, relegation for our opposition. So
I would take, and this will be a throwback for those who were there, and I'm sure there were many of our listeners who were, I would take the same score, not to that team, as the last time we played Burnley in our last home game of the season. And let's be honest, that score and scorer could happen again. 1-0. Yep. Danny Ings.
Yep.
Yeah, we went. bloody awful it was.
So can you imagine in terms of if it is last minute 1-0 and Ings scores? He won't be celebrating, but in terms of former team responsibility for sending them down, and he scored against them at Turf Moor. Probably 25% of his goals for the season, if he scores one on Thursday, would have been against Burnley. Yeah, well, that is a story.
If that happens, it'll be Jake joining you for the next podcast, because I'll have spontaneously combust somewhere.
I think it'd only be me, because he'd be fighting his own battles, probably quite literally, in terms of if it was 1-0. So I might need to get a rota of guest hosts in that stage. But
join us next week for Baz and Dave as they chat through the Man City game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we were talking earlier about looking forward to the future. I mean, what a future that is in terms of that. But before we go and reminisce too much about what might be, we will wrap up what has been in terms of this episode of the podcast. So thanks for listening or watching if you're watching us on YouTube. Obviously, stick with us on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity between now and the game for all the build-up and all our witty, no doubt, observations, polls, comments, news, team news, transfer news, some other news. Or you can reminisce on episodes past and check out our YouTube channel, Talk of the Trinity, all our audio providers, Amazon, Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, lots more. I mean, if you want to find us, you will be able to find us somewhere on our audio channels. But before I pass you over to Mr. Trinity himself for his final thoughts, just leaves me to say thanks for listening. If you're going Thursday, or if you're watching on TV, hope you enjoy the game. And we'll be back with you again soon. Cheers for listening.
Well, as per usual, big thank yous to everybody who was listening. If you see us at the game, I will happily sign autographs. I'll take pictures for you. Yeah, just hand me the camera and I'll take that picture of you standing in front of whatever stadium you're in. Baz will be there. Baz will happily sign pictures, or he'll tell you something negative upon request. Oh, you've got 4 haircuts and all of them are crap. All about the Villa. On a serious on a serious note, it's been a monumentous and historical week for football, especially with Jake Daniels' news just coming out yesterday. So we would like to show our support to Jake and also to other players who find themselves in a similar position. In the year that we're in at the moment, it shouldn't be such big news surrounding a person's choice. It should just be a way of life that we all accept. There's been a lot of racist abuse in the Everton match against Brentford, we've heard. If you see it, report it. There's no room for that in football at all. And make sure at half-time you stood there clapping, singing Hot Enders in the Sky as loud as you can. But until next time, when you will be joining Baz and Dave or whoever else he wants to invite on the show, just remember, we're Villa till we die. Have a look out for Jake being chased by an angry mob of Burnley fans. If you can take a jar down to the game, please do so. Sweep me up, pop it in there, post me back to my wife. It's the house with all the tomato residue on the front. But until next time, I'm Villa till I die. Cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. Up the Villa.